So the actual expiratory muscles for English, for speaking, are all the ones down here in the abdomen. We've got lots of thick bands of muscle down here which help us with posture, but also enable us to push air out of ourselves. And these are the ones which we need to train when we're training our students to use expiratory action in order to create stresses. And once they can do this, they can get at what is the single most important, the most fundamental distinction, the most important part of English pronunciation, the distinction between stressed syllables on the top, and a stressed syllable might sometimes carry a pitch change, it may not, it will be louder and longer and all these other things, but they get the distinction between stressed syllables and unstressed syllables, which normally have a schwa in them, but occasionally you'll get a word like yellow, which has a stressed syllable to begin with, a second syllable which isn't stressed, but does have a full vowel in it. So as teachers, we need to be aware of what exactly the distinction is between a stressed syllable, and an unstressed syllable. But once we've got that clear, we can then be teaching our students to make that distinction using their abdominal muscles. Now, I mentioned at the beginning that for an articulatory approach to work in any activity, but particularly in pronunciation, students have to become present to what they're doing and become more sensitive to what it involves. So we do need exercises to take students' presence, and our own presence for that matter, to what we're doing with our abdominal muscles. We've all long ago automatized, made automatic, all the gestures involved with speech. What we need to do is to come back to that and make it conscious again. So I'm just going to illustrate this with a few of the sort of exercises one can do, just making extended s and z sounds. And instead of paying attention to what's happening with your mouth, now pay attention to what's happening at the level down here with your abdominal musculature. So for example, if we just take number 3, can you make an extended s and then follow that by making an extended z sound, but keep your attention with what you're doing with your respiratory system. And what's the difference between making a s and a z? What's the difference when you make a s sound and a z sound? Yeah. Yep, absolutely. You can feel a difference. There will be differences with the effort you put in, with the volume, the rate of change, because s involves more air coming out, so you'll feel yourself decreasing, this volume decreasing more quickly. Now, we don't have time to do a lot of these exercises, but this is the kind of thing we need to do with ourselves as teachers, and which we can then do with our students to get them used to the idea of being present to what they're doing with their abdominal muscles. I've got another example over here. One quite nice thing is to use snorting. If you channel all the air out of your nose, it becomes very apparent what's going on. So a sniff would be pulling air up in through your nose, and a snort would be pushing air sharply down through your nose. And if you snort, but pay attention to what you do to create that rush of air, you'll discover something about how your abdominal muscles work. Do you want to try that? And can you feel this sharp pull in with your muscles here? This is what you need. If you want to push more air through the system, you want to do this little sharp intake down here, but you do when you're snorting. And we can then take this physical activity over, and when we're working on English sentences, and if they seem to be too continuous, if they seem to be too level, and we want to get the stresses right in English, then we can say to the students, well, for each of the stressed syllables, here we have hickory dickory dock, the mouse ran up the clock. We've got 6 stressed syllables, and on each one, there should be a little gesture with your respiratory systems in order to create the stresses. Do you want to just try that? Say this sentence, but don't say it in your normal way. Say it with exaggerated gestures with your abdominal muscles. Okay, so there are going to be 6 pushes in total. Try it again. And what's interesting, I think, is it feels a bit unnatural. Obviously, it feels a bit labored, but the sound which comes out is completely authentic. It sounds like absolutely correct English, but you've just hyper-articulated the speech-breathing aspect of it. And if a student comes to English from a language which doesn't have a system of stress in it, they will have never done anything like this. Whereas English-speaking children have learnt to do this. The process of being an apprentice for English involves, as a child, making very active gestures with the abdominal muscles, which we then automatize and as adults become expert at doing. So we don't need to worry about it anymore. And in fact, our physiology changes, a number of things change. But we need to get this into our students as a physical activity, which they can then take out of the classroom and practice on the bus or in the park, wherever else they're inspired to practice their English.